Rangers fans, welcome to Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast. I'm Andrew Chelney. That's Nick Zararis. And Nick, we have news now. Opening night is like 3 months away, but the Rangers will officially open their season at Madison Square Garden against Stan Muse and the Pittsburgh Penguins Tuesday, October 7th at 8 p.m. Again, that's like 3 months away, but hey, we have the news now. The rest of the schedule will be posted Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern.
Hopefully it goes better than when they lost to Cody Glass and Kevin Hayes back in March. That was really such a death knell. No Malkin, no Crosby. I remember sitting in the bar talking with my friend I was going to the game with, and someone at the next table had overheard us, and he goes, "Oh, no Crosby, no Malkin? All right, so we're betting the Rangers, right?" And I looked at him like, do you know how this team works? How long? You're like 58 years old and you think you want to bet legal U.S. currency on the Rangers to win a game they're supposed to win?
Yeah.
A game not only are they supposed to win, but a game they need to win. A game that you have a month left in the season. You are 8-ish points back of the last playoff spot. You are playing a team with no Malkin, no Crosby, that has a backup goalie that's first line is being centered by 32-year-old Kevin Hayes. And you think they're going to win this game? Come on now. Come on. At a certain point, man, you understand why the sports books stay in business at a certain point. Everybody thinks, oh, I got it. I got it. Look, if you had it, there wouldn't be a sports book industry. Right. Alas.
No, but you can't. You can't. I mean, that game was the penultimate, this season is over game. There was a lot of those games heading into that game. But that was like the number one. Oh my God, it's over! It's never been more over a game I think I've ever seen. You're facing Kevin Hayes and like the guy off the street and that 42-year-old emergency backup goaltender that beat the Toronto Maple Leafs, and you lost. Like that's how dire it was. And that game was, let's just say, not making the highlight reel.
No, I mean, you scored one goal, and I think it was Nedeljkovic, and, the Penguins were with the Rangers in the bottom 5 of defensive teams in the NHL last year. So really a truly significant game in the mess that was last season. It's a good TV matchup. You understand why ESPN schedules it. I mean, this is always an ESPN or a national game.
The first game is Florida and Chicago at 5 p.m.
On a Tuesday? For a banner raising, that's kind of weird.
On a Tuesday?
I mean,
against Chicago?
If it's at Florida, that's especially weird because that's, a banner raising home game. Like, you would want that to, like, get as many people, whatever. Right. It's not like it particularly matters all that much to us, being that this is a Rangers podcast, but
it's weird, though. It's weird.
Oh, it is. It's unquestionably weird. I mean, ESPN's tried that. They've tried to start like a 6:15 game here and there to just try and get 3 games on in one night.
But even 6 makes more sense than 5 on a Tuesday.
For sure.
That's 2 p.m. Western time. People are having their lunch break.
They're trying to get 3 games in the one night, and they're trying to get the Ranger game in the best TV slot. I mean, that's one of the reasons why the TV – and look, I know the TV ratings didn't account for a lot of the streaming on Max, which is where a lot of the Western Conference Final, where the Cup Final were. But that's why the numbers weren't great for the playoffs in the second half of the postseason. None of the New York teams, no Islanders, Rangers, Devils passed the second round. No Pittsburgh, no Buffalo, no Chicago, no Detroit, no Bruins. Those are your major American TV markets. Without those teams, people still watch. We're sickos, we'll watch, but the average fan is not going out of their way to watch games not involving their favorite team in the playoffs, or you're not getting that casual fan who will tune in if a local team is in the playoffs. And that's why the numbers weren't great. And ultimately, TV ratings, that's not my problem. I'm not an ad executive. I'm not Gary Bettman. I'm not Bill Daly. But there are things, you could do to facilitate better viewership, like getting the Stanley Cup final on network television as opposed to cable, which everybody seems to have figured out other than the NHL, playing Cup final games on NBCSN, on the Versus Network, on the Outdoor Sports Network, as opposed to NBC, which, again, the reason the NFL is the best TV product is because it's on CBS, Fox, and NBC every week. Everybody has those. There's no premium upselling for cable. There's no TNT. And look, TNT is a pretty common channel. Most basic packages have that. But alas, TV ratings are conversation for bored people, as you might tell, being that it's the middle of July and we're getting we're getting Morgan Barron signs for 2 years at $1.45 million as the breaking news of the day. There's not a lot going on in the hockey world right now. You know, there are some RFAs to be dealt with. There's maybe an Erik Karlsson or a Brian Rust or perhaps a Rickard Rakell trade somewhere down the line. But we know Florida.
Jason Robertson still without a contract. Florida probably has to trade someone. They're like $3 or $4 million over the cap, probably Evan Rodriguez. But being that we have most of July to go and all of August, a lot of this is going to get put on the back burner for a while because these people, they do not work through their summers. They are not like the rest. Sweet time.
They have a European schedule. As much as the NHL likes to critique the European mindset of being finesse and skill-based and not working hard, the European schedule is what the NHL operates on, where nothing happens for 2 months because everyone wants to go on vacation. But alas, today's show is very straightforward. I have a list of every single transaction of note. I don't have AHL trades. I don't have one-for-one player trades of prospects. I don't have pick swaps. I don't have the inconsequential stuff. I have player trades for guys who have played games for the Rangers or signed as free agents that have played for the Rangers on a long list. Going to evaluate each of these transactions on 3 simple criteria. Is there logic behind it? How valuable was said addition? And did it work? Those are the 3 simple criteria for evaluating these transactions. I would like to grade it on a scale of 1 to 5, starting with the 2021 offseason. The reason a lot of us, and speaking for me, have been skeptical of a lot of the subsequent moves is because that first offseason was so bad, like genuinely window shorteningly bad. You could make a strong argument that if they just wrote it out for a year with that group and looked around and said, okay, we're not as close as we think we are, you would have a lot more of a runway. But starting with the first move of that offseason, trading for Barclay Goodrow's rights, giving him the 6-year deal at $3.6 million. So the logic was getting a third line center and trying to recreate a Walmart version.
And he has cups.
Yes. The logic of acquiring Barclay Goodrow was trying to create a Walmart version of the Goodrow, Coleman, Yanni Gourde line in Tampa Bay. The problem, of course, being that Barclay Goodrow is not Yanni Gourde. He cannot center a third line and carry a third line and play in a functional way the same way. Out of 5, I would say that is a 2 out of 5. I think that is a move that I can see what you're trying to do logic-wise. It's just got a very low chance of working out. I think it is a very I wouldn't say illogical because I can see what they were trying to do. Just had a really low propensity for working out.
Yeah, I mean, like, I would give it a 1.5 if I have to give it a whole number. I guess I just ran down to a 1. Like, I guess, in a vacuum, logically, it makes sense. Like, oh, this line as a trio did really well. Why don't we just get one of those guys and just have it work out for our team? That's not how hockey works. Unfortunately, I hate to break it to people, like, especially in the bottom 6, you can get functional players from better teams and try to insert them in your bottom 6, sure, but Barclay Goodrow was by far the worst player of the trio on that team.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not, if you were signing Yanni Gourde, this would be a different conversation. But you didn't. You signed Barclay Goodrow to that ridiculous contract, which I don't know why I feel like you outbid yourself. I don't know who else was going to give Goodrow that kind of money for that term. You outbid yourself. And the logic, again, like you said, is, okay, well, he was one of the 3 people on that shutdown line. He's won cups, etc. But you can't just take a third of a line and say, oh, well, it's going to work exactly the same here in a new system, in a new environment with new players and a whole new third line. That's not how that works.
No.
So I don't, like, I see in theory the logic, but I don't really see the end game with it. I don't like the money, and clearly it didn't work out.
Yeah, no, for value, I'd say it's a 1. That was a terrible contract the day it was signed. And effectiveness, utility-wise, for some reason, Gerard Gallant thought Barclay Goodrow was a top 6 forward for a lot of the 2 seasons he was the coach. I think utility-wise, I would say that's a 2 out of 5, that he was used a lot and, like, to a degree that he was actively out of his depth. He was used so much. But you got the 2 moments in the conference final last year.
Sure.
You got the talking point. And I think that's Barclay Goodrow's Rangers legacy, is that him getting waived was so demoralizing for the team that the entire season was adrift. The entire season was adrift, that they got rid of a guy who played 14 minutes per night, and not a good 14 minutes per night. So
I mean, I think utility wise, it's a 1-2, because it's not like he played in the top 6 despite him not being good at it.
No,
like Gallant made him play top 6 minutes, but they didn't get anything useful out of that. He was there. I'll say that. Like he was physically out there, but was he useful? I would say no.
I would say execution-wise, you get a 2 out of 5 from me for that. All right, next up. The week after they trade for Barclay Goodrow, they trade for Ryan Reeves, who demands a contract extension or says, I will retire. And Chris Drury gave him a 2-year extension to a 34-year-old who was, I wouldn't say a part-time player, but not a full-time player for the Golden Knights that previous season. And that's coming off of the Tom Wilson stuff. Gerard Gallant's got the familiarity. He's vouching for him. This is a guy we need. This is ones all across the board. This was a terrible decision. There was no logic beyond, we need someone to punch people. That was the only logic for this. Ryan Reeves has no utility as a hockey player in 2021. And somehow Mike Greer traded for him last week, which mystifying that somebody would look at the 2022 New York Rangers 4th line and say, I want to recreate that, but 3 years later on a team that's trying to give guys opportunities to play. No, just an entirely misguided, bad decision. The logic here was, okay, Tom Wilson beat up our best player. We need someone to beat up Tom Wilson. That's the logic. There's nothing else, because this is not a hockey trade.
Famously, the team that wins hockey games are the one that has the better vibes.
Yes.
And the one that punches people more. So,
I mean, effectively, yeah. I mean, and like the real quick on this, because we do have a lot of these, so we can't take too long on each of them. Real quick, I mean, you saw the Penguins do this. The Penguins won 2 Stanley Cups in a row and said, you know what? We're a little worried about Tom Wilson. We're going to bring in Ryan Reeves. And that undoubtedly sped up the decline of a team that won 2 straight Stanley Cups. It just remarkable that they could do the community meme of, did it work out for them? No. Well, then why are you trying to recreate it 3 years later?
He also couldn't play for Toronto at all. And then Mike Greer was like, oh, well, you know what? He could play for us.
No. He could. I mean, I suppose, I guess if he's out there, that's technically playing, but alas.
He's physically present.
3 days after they trade for Ryan Reeves, they trade Buchnevich and a 4th to St. Louis for Sammy Blais in a 2nd.
This is my Joker origin story.
Yeah. Logic-wise, it's a 1. They wanted to cut salary. They wanted to get cheaper. They looked at a guy who was big, and that was really it, who had an okay junior hockey career, who played like 9 minutes per game on a team that won the Stanley Cup in St. Louis in 2019. And you saw that as the justification for his acquisition was, well, he played on a team that won a cup. He played 9 minutes a game. That's not really that significant of a role. And I think back to that one anonymous piece from The Athletic that summer when Carp was still the Rangers columnist, where he interviewed 3 former Rangers. And the one former Ranger anonymously said, yeah, these are the types of guys that make the difference. Barclay Goodrow is the reason Tampa Bay got over the hump. Guys like Sammy Blais are the reason the Rangers could get over the hump. And it's like, they do have to play hockey at some point. Right. You know, there's that clip. There's that famous clip of Cosell on Dan Patrick where he's talking about EJ Manuel, the draft pick at the time of the Bills. And he's like, well, I thought everybody liked EJ Manuel. He was a good teammate. Yeah, that's nice. Can you make throws? Can you play football at some point? And that's what it comes down to. That's why this first offseason was so disastrous. I mean, you can make a strong argument that if you bundled all of the assets they have spent in the last 4 years trying to get first-line right wings, you could have paid Buchnevich $12 million per year 5 years ago, and it probably would have been more worth it than all of the stuff you've burned in the meantime.
Well, you gave Reeves money, you gave Goudreau money, you gave Blais money, and what was that defenseman from Colorado?
Patrick Nemeth. We're getting there.
Patrick Nemeth, yeah. And like every time we mention Buchnevich on the show, we inevitably get like 1 or 2 comments that are like the Rangers could not have afforded Pavel Buchnevich, and
they could have taken him to arbitration.
And I'm here to tell you for the 300th time that if you simply don't like the money that you gave those players that were actively bad and you actively had to pay people to get rid of, you paid them more than what Pavel Buchnevich made in his new contract. End of story. Pavel Buchnevich would have been cheaper to keep than paying bad players more money. That is an objective truth, whether you like to think of that or not. 2 + 2 is 4, and that's the truth.
And real quick on that note, you don't get to say though, well, Drury thought he was getting Eichel thing. If you made those moves on the condition that you thought you were getting a player without that trade finalized, you're 12 years old. You are legitimately 12 years old that you got rope-a-doped. You imagine telling people, oh, I got out negotiated by Kevin Adams, and saying that as a justification of, oh, he didn't know any better. Again, are you 12 years old? If you have an agreement in place and the paperwork done, okay. But you don't make all of these moves with the idea that, okay, now we're going to get this trade done, because very clearly the trade did not get done. Speaking of Patrick Nemeth, the logic was, I would say, a 2. Big, Swedish, somebody who had decent underlying numbers in Colorado, but under closer scrutiny, especially in the postseason, those numbers did not hold up. Dealt with some weird stuff off the ice that definitely played a factor in his derailment that season, but objectively awful hockey player. The Rangers had to give up 2 second-round picks to make him go away, and that's the reason they couldn't make a good offer sheet this past year, because they would have needed to trade to get their draft pick back from Utah. Execution, he stunk. They traded for Justin Braun because he was so bad. They traded for another defenseman to replace him, and he never really fit. He did not play anything resembling what the Rangers needed from him, and part of the reason why you can make an argument Braden Schneider's never really made any progress is that he's had a revolving door of terrible defensive partners, which started with Patrick Nemeth.
I'm going to give this a 2, and I think, logically that there was at least some sense to this. He played relatively well in Colorado in a sheltered role, and I feel bad for Nemeth, because I do feel like whatever the off ice issues were essentially derailed when he played. Like, how much of that was him just not playing well and him not fitting in the system versus how much of that was the off-ice stuff that clearly impacted him? There's no answer to that. But it's very apparent that during his time here, whatever was going on was not letting him play to the level that he wanted to. It was clear. And, I feel bad. Like the tenure was bad, and, Rangers fans don't look back on Nemeth highly, but I do wonder if Nemeth had everything sorted off ice, if that would have made him play, demonstratively better.
That's a fair addendum. And then the last one from that first offseason, Jared Tenorti, there was no point in making this move.
No, he's bad.
He's an awful hockey player.
Yeah.
That was just getting a body in here with the idea of, well, he can occasionally fight if we need him to. So after that, you get to the spring of 2022, and I have these broken up by the calendar year as opposed to the season. You get the flurry of moves at that first deadline. You get Kopp, you get Vetrano, you get Justin Braun, and you get Tyler Mott. So for Andrew Kopp, logic-wise, I would give that a 4. Perfectly adequate top 6 addition, useful player. I mean, he scored 9 goals in 17 playoff games. He did a really good job in the role he played. And of course, that's looking at it, the logic of it through the lens of the result. So that might be misguided, but at the very least, I think that's a logical move. It made sense. It filled a really big need. Value-wise, I'm going to be a little harsher on, because they did give up a lot for a guy who's not crazy. They gave up a conditional first that turned into Brad Lambert, who's a pretty good prospect, a second-round pick, and Morgan Barron for a guy who was like a career 40 to 50 point forward. Kind of feels rich for what he was. I know those were conditional picks, so the fact that the Rangers went as far as they did bumped up their commiserate value, but they gave up a lot for a guy they only got 30 games out of, because he went to Detroit and signed that big extension.
Overall, I'll give this a 3. I think logically it made a lot of sense, and I think the fit was good.
Yeah.
Andrew Kopp played well for the most part when he was here. I like the logic. I like, the idea of going out and acquiring a player of his caliber. I don't like how much they had to spend in order to get him. I understand, picks don't win you cups and et cetera, and Andrew Kopp could have, I guess. But a first, a second, and a prospect for a guy that has never scored, 60, 70 points in the league is a lot. That's a lot to give up for somebody like that. And I understand that Kopp, was somebody that had multiple teams calling for. He was, Copp was more of the market driving up the price versus maybe the Rangers just throwing the kitchen sink at him because because they wanted to. The market really did, make that more expensive than it needed to be. But I understand the idea of trading for him despite that. But even then, a first, a second, and a prospect for that type of player is rich. And yeah, he left right after. So that's a 3 for me.
Frank Vetrano, logic-wise, a 5. They got a guy who wasn't in the Florida lineup. He couldn't get in the lineup at all for Florida. He dropped right into the Rangers' top 6 and scored a lot of goals in the playoffs for a 4th-round pick. Anytime you can turn a depth pick into a starting caliber player who plays at a reasonably high level, pretty much everything about that worked out well. And they avoided the pitfall of giving him a big extension in the offseason, not making the emotional ploy, though I could have seen an argument for bringing him back. Probably not at the number the Ducks ultimately signed him to, but that's a good move. That's your ideal low risk, high floor. That's like the better version of what the Jack Roslovic trade that we'll get to eventually is, where you trade a 4th-round pick for a guy who's really good at one thing and he does a good job of it.
It's a 5. I mean, you gave up a 4th for a guy that did all of that for you. And even though he left and, made a bunch of money in Anaheim, you really can't ask for much more. And by the way, this is what Florida does every single season, right? They use these depth picks and they go and they take flyers on people just to see what happens. And this is how they fill out their roster. And this is what you're supposed to do with a team like the Rangers, like the Panthers, where you don't have, $30-40 million of cap space to fill out your team. You need to take flyers. And Frank Vetrano was one for the Rangers, and he was great. For a 4th, you can't really ask for much more.
Yeah. Next up, Justin Braun, 3 across the board. Perfectly fine. Didn't cost a lot. Didn't play insane, but was useful. Was an okay hockey player. They probably should have swung for something bigger there. That would be my critique of that move. That they needed a real 3rd pair left defenseman, and they just didn't have one in that cup run. Ultimately, of course, it was more than just Justin Braun that let them down against Tampa Bay. But if they swing for a bigger spot there, it definitely helps a little bit more. But they made the big moves up front. So perfectly adequate maneuver across the board. Nothing remarkable, but did the job.
I'll be a little bit more generous. I'll give him a 4. I think for the price that Justin Braun commanded, he was more than fine. Like I want to highlight here, the Rangers gave up less for Justin Braun than they did for Carson Soucy, and Justin Braun played for this team. Carson Soucy was so bad he did not. Justin Braun was at the end of his career. It sounded like he was, going to get top 4 minutes or whatever. But in the role that he was given, he was totally fine, which I can't really say for a whole lot of other acquisitions the Rangers have made in the past few seasons, especially on the blue line. Justin Braun was a serviceable defenseman. He didn't cost much. And he was, when he was out there, you didn't notice him too much. And that's the best compliment you can give a defenseman. So I'll give it a 4.
Next up, we get to the last one of that deadline, which is Tyler Mott. Tyler Mott broke his ankle, didn't play a lot in that first playoffs. Nice dude. It's hard to give a fair grade to a guy who only played like 10 games, but I think he's a 3 across the board. Perfectly fine. They didn't give up a ton for him. When he played, he was useful, but when he came back in the playoffs off a broken ankle that very clearly wasn't all the way healed, he wasn't particularly effective. So 3s across the board. Fine hockey player. Wish they could have kept him in the offseason as opposed to letting him go, but they had to have Ryan Reeves on the team, so that's the money difference.
Yeah, I mean, 3 makes sense. There's not enough of a runway to really determine a better grade, so 3 is fine.
Yeah. Next up, we get to the offseason moves. The big one that summer is Vincent Trocheck, who they signed to replace Ryan Strome. Logic-wise, I would say it's a 3 out of 5. I think if you go back and listen to the first 3 or 4 episodes of this show, we're very much of the opinion that Trocheck is better than Ryan Strome. There's not an argument to be made there. He's a better hockey player than Ryan Strome. The average annual cap hit being under $6 million per year, though they had to stretch it over 7 years to get there, makes it where it's pretty palatable. The question, and ultimately the last 3 seasons have shown, he is not a second-line center in the conventional sense. typically speaking, your center is going to be your play driver. He's had the seasons he's had the last 2-3 years because he's been able to play with Panarin. And that's ultimately been one of the Rangers' issues, is that their best forward is a winger, and the impact a great winger can have over a center is not the same. You know, a center is inherently more valuable than a forward. I think the Trocheck signing is a 3. I think there is enough value there in these first 3 seasons. And look, of course, as everyone said at the time, if they win the cup, it doesn't matter that they're going to pay him till 2030. They are not technically out of their window of contention, even though it kind of feels like they are. I think this is kind of the move that sets them up to get where they are right now, that they signed a guy who was approaching 30 to play a role. He hadn't really played, you know, if you'll recall, he was the third line center for Carolina on that Carolina team that lost to the Rangers in the second round that year. And the Rangers said, no, we'll play you higher in our lineup. We think you can do a little bit more. He took a little bit less money to get more term. He's got the no trade. That's, I think, 16 teams, something like that. So they could conceivably move him if they get to that point. But I do think there was an opportunity to kind of either shoot higher, or I would say shoot a little more broadly to try and raise the ceiling of the team.
I agree. I think there's a argument to be made that if JT Miller was on the team prior to the signing, so like let's say it was Miller, Zibanejad, blank for Barclay Goodrow, and then you sign Trocheck to be the bona fide third line center that could also play top 6 minutes if he needed to, it would have been a 5 out of 5. Trocheck would have been fantastic in that role. And I think that, that the team would be probably in a better spot now than it is.
They would have had more serious kicks at the can.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah. And plus they would have had more top 6 firepower in the conference finals, because famously they did not when they did make it. So that, that would have been nice, but that's not what happened. So I think I think Vincent Trocheck, when that happened, I can see the logic. I can see, he's a tough player to play against. He's somebody that gets under people's skin. Clearly, in that Hurricanes and Rangers series, he got under the Rangers' skin. He was somebody that was, effective, fiery, and was somebody the Rangers didn't really want to see out there on the ice. So I can understand the logic of Drury watching that series and thinking, oh, I got to go sign this guy because he's an ass. He's annoying to play against, and I want him on my team. Also, he's good at hockey. So I can see it. I think the conference final run showed his highs, but I also think last season showed his lows, where now you're like, okay, well, which version of Trocheck are we going to see? Now it's more of a question mark. Logically, I'll give this maybe a 4 out of 5, but everything else is I don't know. Like at this point, with him still having 4 years left on his contract, I don't know what kind of player Vincent Trocheck is and how to maximize his highs. Because everything went well 2 years ago. Everything went not well last year. So what version of him are we going to see for the next 4 years of his contract? I have no idea. So by that definition, I have to give it a 3.
Yeah, I think he's a perfectly good hockey player. It's just they probably need a little bit more out of him if they wanted to get where they were going. And I don't think that was realistic to ask a guy who had been a third line center on good teams to kind of make that jump and do stuff he hadn't really done before. And look, when you play with Panarin, you can get away with not having as good of a second line center. But at the same time, when it comes down to it and you're playing, the Barkovs of the world, you need more guys. And that's ultimately been one of the issues over the last 2 or 3 years.
If you wanted a bona fide top 6 center, you could have done better.
Yes.
Which is why ultimately I think 3 is the appropriate grade, because you gave a guy who, at the time was nearing his, he was already in his prime and didn't show to be a bona fide top 6 player. And you gave him a long contract so that he could try to be one, which is not his game. So why did you do it?
So next up after that, one last one in that window is Ben Harper. Ones across the board.
Yes.
They claimed a guy off of waivers and played him for 35 games, and he just didn't look like an NHL defenseman. And then for some reason, they extended him for 2 more years. Granted, he's been in the AHL for the last 2 years. He had that 15-game suspension this past season for shoving a referee, if I remember correctly, something crazy along those lines. But I understand you need bodies off of waivers. Like the Nemeth situation, they couldn't keep him. They had to get rid of him. They also didn't have a guy. They didn't want to play Zach Jones there for whatever reason. So they needed a body to fill that spot. Harper stunk. A terrible hockey player.
He was not good.
Next up, we get to the flurry of moves at the deadline the following year. Tarasenko and Mikkola, I would be willing to give that a 4. I think the logic was there. They didn't give up a ton value-wise. The execution was the issue. They also compounded this by juggling the lines a million times in the 2 months that Kane and Tarasenko were on the Rangers, and we'll get to Patrick Kane in a second. Mikkola, they didn't know what to do with him. He's very clearly shown he's a pretty decent depth defenseman, and he was playing like third pair lefty. He couldn't get in the line. Couldn't get higher in the lineup. That Devils series is very funky. If you go and look at the underlying numbers, you go and look at it on a game by game basis. There's a lot to unpack there. But that was the ideal trade. You know, you filled in 2 needed holes. You needed a top 6 winger, and you needed another defenseman. Tarasenko and Mikkola very famously went on to win the Stanley Cup with Florida the following season. So they had good hockey left in them. It just didn't really work out all that much with them as Rangers. You know, the numbers were fine. You know, I think Tarasenko had, I'll say like 7 or 8 points in 15, 20 games, which for what he was at that point, perfectly reasonable.
I give this trade a 5. The Rangers didn't trade the kitchen sink to get somebody that was a top 6 winger and also a objectively not bad defenseman. For, you know, and they didn't have to trade 3 first rounders or, you know, or something silly to make that happen. I think at the time, I think the trade was terrific for the Rangers. You filled one massive hole that you really needed to fill, and also bolstering up your blue line with somebody that can actually play well for you. I like, you know, the logic was there. The execution was not as great as as you might have wanted it to be. But if I'm looking at it from just Drury's perspective, that's a great deal by Drury for sure.
Yeah, it was everything you needed it to be. After that, we get to Patrick Kane, which they traded for a guy who needed hip resurfacing surgery as soon as the season was over. His numbers weren't bad. You know, he had, I want to say 7 points and 5 or 6 points in the 7 games against the Devils in the first round. But they reorganized the entire team around a guy who needed hip resurfacing surgery. They changed the first power play unit. They juggled the forward lines 1,000 times in the 2 months that Kane and Tarasenko were on the Rangers. They forced Kane to play with Panarin. That didn't work particularly well. They went back to it 3 or 4 separate times. They gave up a lot for what he was, considering he really only wanted to come to the Rangers.
He forced to come to the Rangers essentially, and yet the pay was like still
a conditional
way higher
second.
Than it probably should have been.
A conditional second that could have become a first if the Rangers, I think, made it to the Cup final, which was a lot for a guy who only wanted to go to one team. They had to do the roster shenanigans to afford him, where they could only dress 17 skaters for 3 or 4 games there. They didn't put Brian Lindgren on LTIR at that point for whatever reason, even though he was hurt. I would say it's a 2. I understand why they did it, but the value was not there and the execution was not there because they messed up the entire team to accommodate him.
You did that, and this is a 1 for me, because ultimately the biggest reason you traded for Patrick Kane is his resume, not for what he could do for your team now. You traded for, but he won those cups 10 years ago. Oh, but he had all those goals 10 years ago. Oh, but he's Showtime. Oh, but he's this, but he's that. You traded for a guy that was skating on one leg because his hip was so bad he needed surgery the minute the season was over. He was not 100%. He was, especially during the playoffs, my man's was a power play merchant to the highest extreme, did absolutely nothing at 5-on-5. Go, like, if you don't believe me, like, forget the analytics. Just go and watch those games. Watch those shifts. You don't need me to tell you. Just go for yourself and watch. He didn't do anything. Defensively, forget about it. But even at 5-on-5 offensively, he was coasting. Yeah, like when he had the puck, he was a good facilitator. Sure, I'll give you that. But he didn't create anything. a top 6 wingers in this league, especially for the type of caliber that Patrick Kane is supposed to be, should be able to create for himself, by himself, for his teammates. He didn't do any of that. He was a big old power play merchant, which the Rangers already had way too many of at that point anyway. And you traded for the idea and not the man himself. That's a 1.
Patrick Kane played 19 games in the regular season. He had 12 points, 11% shooting, and then in the playoffs, I want to say it was 7 points in 7 games.
He had that one nice goal, and that is what like 8 of the comments are going to be under this video is like, oh, but he had that goal. But he had that nice goal. Okay, sure. But what about the other times that he's on the ice? You know, the 99.99 repeating times that he was on the ice for. What did he do? Oh, you have the floor. Besides, he had a nice goal. That's great. But like he had more than one shift here. What about everything else?
Yeah. They traded for Tyler Mott a second time, which I know people forget. They didn't really like. There wasn't really a point to this. They needed, I guess they upgraded the 4th line, but like you just burned a draft pick on a guy that you weren't going to bring back anyway. Like he wasn't expensive or anything, but like they traded for him without really a plan for him. You know, that 4th line that year with him, Gaudreau, and I think Vesey, should have been good on paper, but it wasn't particularly good. I know we had quite a bit of discourse about that being the only line that was like consistently generating offense in game 6 and 7 of that Devils series. So you can make an argument that it's fine, 2 or 3. I don't have a lot of thoughts about the second 15 games Tyler Mott played as a Ranger.
I mean, I'll give this a 4 only just because it was cheap.
Yeah.
The idea was good. Tyler Mott is a relatively serviceable hockey player that did well in the short amount of time that he was here. And it didn't work the first time, so you try it again, see if it works. It would be a lot worse if he was a bad player, but he's not. So, of all the trades Drury could have made, sending out a mid pick for a guy that shown that he is an overall net positive for your team, why not? 4.
Next up, we get to the summer after that. Blake Wheeler, Eric Gustafson, Jonathan Quick, Nick Bonino, Tyler Pitlick. Blake Wheeler's a 2. I get what they were trying to do. He just was like cooked as a hockey player. Like he had no legs. He had no skate speed. Then he broke his leg and was cool for the vibes. And then for some reason played a game in the conference final like a month and a half after breaking his leg, very clearly was not healthy and was very clearly can we motivate the guys a little bit more by playing him? And yeah, I get it, but it didn't really work. The value's fine. He was close to league minimum, but didn't really work all that much.
I'll agree and just say 2 because at least I understand the logic of, this is a guy that played a long time in Winnipeg and somebody that is, respected around the league and is somebody that, while not the Blake Wheeler that he was, maybe he still has something. And, I don't know what the extent of Drury knowing how cooked he was prior to the signing. I don't know what the answer to that is. But yeah, as soon as he got here, you can tell, oh, he's the slowest player in the league.
Yeah.
Oh, this is bad. This is not going to work out. And this was before he broke his leg. Yeah. And then he broke his leg, wasn't, back to game shape, and you put him in the conference finals.
Crazy thing to ask a guy to do for his first hockey game in like 2 months is, Florida, the best forechecking and probably the fastest team in the league. Good luck. Like crazy.
That is one of the decisions of all time, and also one that is not making the highlight reel.
No, Eric Gustafson, I'm giving a 5 out of 5. Yeah, that's 5. The ideal dart throw of he's low upside. He's high upside. He's close to league minimum. And if he sinks or swims, we have an answer. And he was very effective for what he was. He did a really nice job in Adam Fox's absence that first month and a half or so of the season when Fox was out with an injury. I wish there was a world where they could have found a way to make it work to keep him as the third pair lefty. Ultimately, he got a little bit more money in Detroit, so I get why he left. But that's the ideal low risk, high reward offseason signing.
I agree. I mean, Gustafson was a phenomenal player in November.
Yeah.
He was a little bit, more up and down when Fox came back. There was that period of time where Gustafson had like one good game and then 2 really bad games, and then he would follow it up with another good. Like he was a very up and down player towards the end of the season, But in the beginning, when the Rangers really needed him, he stepped up. And yeah, I mean, it's a 5 out of 5 for like there was no risk, and he was, I mean, for all intents and purposes, outperformed his contract considerably.
Jonathan Quick, I'll give a 4 to. He's a upper echelon goalie now. The first year was a lot better than last year. He's one of the better backup goalies. I think he was, I want to say, like third or fourth amongst backup goalies in wins. I know goalie stats aren't a great wins aren't a great goalie stat, but when we're talking about a backup goalie, do you play well enough that your team has a chance to win? Yeah. I don't know about bringing him back this upcoming season, going into a third straight year of this, approaching 40. I know he's staring down some milestone stats, probably why he wants to run it back one more time, but he's given them
probably his final season.
Yeah, he's given them more than adequate backup goalie performances over the last few years. He's not making a lot of money. It was, I would say, a bit of a dart throw. It's similar in the respect to what we had said before about Gustafsson and Blake Wheeler, and it worked out really well the first time. The second year, not as much, but not a terrible backup.
So your grade is what, 4?
Yeah, 4 out of 5.
I mean, yeah, I'll agree and give this a 4. I think the logic is there. I think also Quick wanted to come here, and he was probably willing to take less money to come here than anywhere else. And the all the storylines add up, and he had for all intents purposes a really solid first year here. Like he needed to get some wins, and in relief of Shesterkin, and he stepped up and he played well, and that's about all that's about as much as you can hope for a backup goalie, especially, we had a lot of questions about Quick when he signed here because he was famously not terrific in the season before. So the worry is, he's fallen off a cliff completely. What is this signing? And he came here and he showed that he still had it, at least for the most part. So, for all the locker room stuff that he does, he played well. And last season was not great. And this season's going to be concerning as well. But I do think it's probably Dylan Garand's spot next season, as long as he continues his trajectory. So, yeah, I mean, it's a 4. I'm sure there were better options on the table, but Quick was cheap. He wanted to come here and he played well.
Very much so. The last two, Pitlick, I'll give an NA to. I don't think he played enough to have a particularly reasonable grade to. Bonino gets a 1. That was, he was out of the league by November. He played a month and a half and did the Trayvon Diggs. Okay, I can't do this anymore. I'm not Trayvon Diggs. Vontae Davis. There we go. He did the Vontae Davis of, I can't do this anymore. The game has left me.
Well, the funniest thing about that is Bonino was going to get sent down. He said, release me because I still want to play in the NHL.
And no one signed him.
And no one signed him. That's how bad it was.
Yep.
He wanted to play, and 31 other teams said, we're all right. We're
Who
fine.
Want me? 100% no.
Yeah, that is literally what happened.
Yeah.
And it's tough. And it's, obviously it's not the way that you want to end your career. It's, it's unfortunate. It sucks for Nick Bonino. And I feel for him. It's tough. You always want to go out on your own terms. And that's not the best way to end your professional career. But he never should have been a Ranger in the first place.
Nope. Next up, we get to the deadline moves of 2024. Wenberg, Roslovic, Chad Ruhwedel. Wenberg gets a 3. The logic was there. It wasn't particularly expensive. I know the draft pick was a little high, but it wasn't crazy. The execution, they had good underlying numbers, him, Kakko, and Cooley. They just didn't score enough goals, and that's ultimately what people remember about that group. I have that as a 3 across the board. Perfectly fine deadline move. They probably could have shot a little higher, but they didn't want to go into the Tyler Toffoli pool, so I get it.
I give this a 3 as well. I think he's the perfect kind of middle 6 guy to plug and play with. I think he's not a top 6 forward by any stretch of the imagination, but in a third line role, he's more than serviceable. He's totally fine. He's not he's going to be an active positive for your team. And, the trade in and of itself, they could they have paid a little bit less if you want to split hairs, sure. But the player's fine, the fit was fine, and I would have liked some more offensive punch there, like you said, but the logic is there. Three is a good number.
Roslovic, I would give this a 2. He didn't cost a lot. He was only a 4th round pick. The logic was there. This is an upside gamble, a guy who's got a really good shot and is a pretty good skater, but doesn't do anything else. And he didn't really work as a Ranger. Like, there were individual flashes of what you saw in Carolina last year where he scored 20 goals, but they needed to shoot higher for this spot, and they didn't.
I will give this a 1, and this has nothing to do with Jack Roslovic. Like, it's unfortunate because Jack Roslovic didn't cost anything. Like you said, like, a mid round, like a 4th round pick doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't. The chances of that pick turning into an NHL player at all, forget an NHL player that does positive things for you out there on the ice is very slim. So the 4th round pick doesn't really matter. My gripe with this trade was that this was the consolation prize. Was that the Rangers could have gotten Jake Guentzel. They could have gotten another actual bona fide top 6 winger to really fill out that roster and really push Florida in that series. And instead, Drury said Jack Roslovic is the solution, and then that's it. And that's why I give this trade a 1. Like, if it was Jack Roslovic for a 4th, and then also on top of that they got somebody else, then the trade grade would be different. But because Jack Roslovic played top 6 minutes in a role that he shouldn't have played at all, to be like, realistically, especially on a team that had Stanley Cup aspirations, this trade is a 1. Jack Roslovic was the best you could do on a team that had the best shot of winning the cup. That was your solution. That's why this trade is a 1. Like, if Jack Roslovic trade in a vacuum is probably like a 4. Because, like, again, the price was dirt cheap and he was all right. He was more than fine. But because that was your big ticket trade, that is a negative $1 million for me.
Fair enough. Chad Ruedel, 3, perfectly fine 7th defenseman, played in a pinch a couple times. Not good, not bad, but for what he cost, perfectly fine with me.
Yeah, 3's fine.
Next up, we get to the summer. After that, you get Sam Carrick, who I will put charitably, I'll give him a 4. Had a few nice moments last season, the goal against the Devils, the goal against Colorado. We'll see what he looks like with Rempe and Edstrom flanking him in the fall for the 4th line this year. If last year was a bit of this is a terrible hockey team and these are funny, nice moments, or if he's actually a decent 4th line center. But off of one season, I'd say a 4.
3 is fine. I think the underlying stats weren't super nice to him, but I think he contributed in other ways that actively did help the team, which, is rare for, like a 4th liner to do. Like, usually it's somebody that is actively worse on the stat sheet, also doesn't really help your team as much on the ice when he's out there. But he provided something that most other plug and play 4th liners couldn't. And despite his lulls during the season, Whomst didn't have lulls last season for the New York Rangers. I think a 4 is worthy.
Okay, next up, Riley Smith. I'll give this a 3. There was nothing wrong with Riley Smith. Like, he was perfectly adequate as a Ranger. He didn't cost a lot. They didn't really have a plan for him, though. He didn't really fit with Kreider and Zibanejad, and then after that, he more or less became an afterthought in what Peter Laviolette was doing with the lineup. They got some value back in trading him to Vegas, but they ultimately used that pick to go and get Carson Soucy, which we'll talk about in a minute. But he's fine. I thought Riley Smith was adequate as a Ranger.
I give this trade a 4. I really like the logic behind it.
Yeah.
The Penguins were selling, he didn't have to trade a 1st round pick to go get him. Yeah, it wasn't the Riley Smith that won the cup in Vegas or anything, but like, this was still somebody that could play top 6 minutes and somebody that probably better suited for that 3rd line right wing spot. But alas, he was so like, I like the idea. I like the swing. Yeah, it didn't quite end up working out and he was sent to Vegas and et cetera, but they could have done a lot worse. And Riley Smith still has a lot, a decent amount left in the tank. I'll give this a 4. I like the idea.
Next up, we get to the flurry of in-season moves. Trouba for Vakanainen and a pick. Vakanainen gets getting rid of Trouba gets a 5. Bringing in Vakanainen gets a 2. I just don't understand the fascination teams have with these former first-round picks. There is nothing about Vakanainen's game that's like, oh, we got to have this guy for another 2 years. He's a 6th or 7th defenseman on an average hockey team. He does not play on a Florida, on an Edmonton. No. He doesn't get in on one of those types of teams. He's a lower end third pair defenseman. But being that you got rid of the Trouba contract, it's not a 1.
I mean, getting rid of Trouba's contract was a 5, especially for not having to retain any salary to make that happen. The trading for Vakanainen is one thing, but extending him makes me give this a 1. And we'll talk about this with Borgen as well. Usually, bad teams will not trade defensemen that play well because they need defensemen that can play well. If bad teams are giving you defensemen, that means that they are not very good at this hockey thing. Like, Vakanainen was mediocre at best on a actively bad team, wasn't really helping them, and was kind of the throw in to make contracts work and all that. So in and of itself, the trade was, hey, here's Jacob Trouba, just take him away from us. But the extension for Vakanainen, who is as much of a guy as you could possibly have a guy be, and give him more years in a contract, like that's the head scratching part of all this. You really should have just let him go, but instead you extended him, and now he's here for another couple of years, which I don't agree with. Getting rid of Trouba was great. Vakanainen was not somebody that I would imagine Trouba actively wanted in the beginning, and now that he had him, he watched him play, and he was like, yeah, we'll take him for another couple of years. That's a 1.
Next up, you get Will Borgen. That's I would say that's somewhere between a 2 and a 3. I see the logic of he's an upside play. He's somebody who's been on bad teams, who hasn't had a lot of opportunity. He's a decent above average skater. He's got okay puck skills, but nothing about him is special. He again, very much like what I just said about Vakanainen. He's a third pair guy on the Panthers. He's a third pair guy on the Oilers, the Stars. The Rangers have him miscast as a second pair guy.
Yeah. I mean, I give the trade a 1. Trading Kaapo Kakko, I never was a fan of. I don't like that move. And you can disagree with me in the comments because I know you will. And I await your comments. But also giving Will Borgen a 5-year extension makes me give this a 1.
Yeah,
like that the trade in and of itself. If you needed to trade Kakko and you got Will Borgen, Will Borgen's not the worst defenseman I've ever seen, and he's okay, he's fine. Trading for him and then giving him a 5-year deal
on 17 games
after a 17-game sample size, brother, what are you doing? Why did you outbid yourself?
Doing that based on how well, I'm using air quotes, he played with K'Andre Miller, and then just not keeping K'Andre Miller on top of that. Why did you keep him? That's why a lot of the logic for some of these decisions falls apart under the slightest bit of examination. Him and Miller play so well together. They're such good compliments.
And then what happened?
Yeah, literally. Okay. Next up, the JT Miller trade, which gets a 4 for me. Reasonable value, a third line center in Hedel, first round pick, and some other stuff. Miller's a good hockey player. He's a point per game player. He's going to be the best or second best forward on the team next year. He's not at a ludicrous cap hit. It's south of $10 million, and he's old. That's the concern. How long can he stay a high-end player? And the no move clause. But he's a good hockey player, and the more good hockey players you have, the better the hockey team is.
I'll give this a 4. I think the only the 2 question marks we brought up at the time of the trade was, okay, well, the team is really bad and not playing well. Why are you rewarding them? It seems like a strange thing to do. And giving up a first round pick, which now ended up going to Pittsburgh in that deal. You're trading a first round pick in essentially what is a lost season. I know you're trying to revitalize it. And by the way, again, as we mentioned before, multiple times, you added a point per game player to your lineup, and you actively got worse which is real bad or a real big red flag for you. But, in a vacuum, the trade was, pretty much great. Philip Hedl was tough to lose, but there was a lot of concern. Like that's his injury history was scary to say the least. Not just from a hockey perspective, like dog, like you're gonna be all right 30 years from now, type of scary. He's a player that you have to just like. It's the box says fragile. The box has like 9 fragile stickers on it. Like dog, if you breathe on this box wrong, you will break the contents. That is a scary proposal for anybody, let alone a professional hockey player. So trading Philip Hedl, was sad, but it makes sense. And you're trading essentially that and a first round pick for a bona fide top 6 point per game player. The trade was great. The circumstances to get JT Miller, given the, flails arms, quickly, that was a little baffling. This team is losing like every game and they're looking real miserable doing it. Okay, well we'll just trade our first round pick to get JT Miller. That'll fix everything, right? Surely.
Next up, I have the Soucy trade. I'm giving that a 2. It didn't cost a ton. I know the third round pick was reasonably high. I know they think they're going to get a reclamation project out of this and he'll be better next year when the team will be better. But other than that, I mean, he got benched after 4 games. He was so bad. That's really all you need to say about it. And it went from, well, Drury's going to try and get rid of him to, well, the Rangers don't want to admit they were wrong in the span of a month and a half, which just shows you how easy it is to get a narrative sold.
1.
Yeah.
1.
And then the Parson in return for the Parson in return with Calvin DeHaan for Jimmy Vesey and Ryan Lindgren. I'd give that a 2.5, a 3, whatever, somewhere in there for the Avalanche return. Reasonable return. I wish they would have played him if they were going to bring him back. That's kind of my big frustration with that. But I wish they would have played DeHaan as well if they were trying to win hockey games. But reasonable return, and I guess we're going to see what Juuso Parssinen is, even though he was healthy bombed by both the Avalanche and Predators over the last 12 months. So
and the Rangers
for that matter is yes. Good point as well.
I give this trade a 5 because you traded Ryan Lindgren, who signed a 4-year deal in Seattle, and his analytics are so red. You can't drive. Like you have to stop your car in front of it because it's so bad. Like it's a bright red stop sign directly in front of you. That's how red his analytics are. And just watch him play. He's fallen off a cliff tremendously. So you trade a guy that did not make your team better in any respect. I understand he's a warrior, et cetera, but he was not the type of player on the ice that fans wanted him to be. And okay, Jimmy Vesey's a guy that just couldn't really play in the lineup anymore. He was okay, but this season was kind of not his greatest. So, you cut ties when you could. So the trade in and of itself was a 5. It's just DeHaan played really well for you in the 2 or 3 games that he was here. Parssinen, who you extended, didn't play for you much either. Like you got the second and the fourth. Like that's what the trade really was for. DeHaan and Parssinen were the contract equivalents, so they had to send contracts out. So it really isn't like Drury traded for those 2 guys specifically, I don't think. But if you're going to extend Parssinen and you're going to make DeHaan so upset, he's going to, say not nice things to Molly about what's going on and then later having to back down from them, probably should have played him a little bit more, but I digress.
All right. That is all of the moves and transactions up until this point. You can't evaluate Gavrikov or Radish because they haven't played any hockey games as Rangers yet. But we will organize our list. We will rank them and distribute that accordingly. That will do it for this week's edition of Liberty Blue. If you could be so kind, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Let us know your thoughts about these transactions, how you feel about them in whatever order you deem worthy. And we'll talk to you guys real soon.
Later.